This is bad. What the FBI uncovered in P Diddy's estate will leave you stunned. What if I told you that one of the most powerful figures in hip-hop, the man behind chart-topping records, billion-dollar deals, and a legacy that helped define a generation, might not be the icon we thought he was? What if behind the designer suits, champagne toasts, and red carpet appearances, there was a secret life, one dark enough to send federal agents storming through the gates of his mansion? On the outside, Sean P. Diddy Combs was everything: a hitmaker, a mogul, a fashion trendsetter, and one of the first black entrepreneurs in entertainment to build an empire from the ground up. From Bad Boy Records to Ciroc to Revolt TV, Combs didn't just climb the ladder. He bought the building. For decades, his name was synonymous with success, wealth, and influence. But that reputation has been ripped wide open. In March 2024, the FBI launched a coordinated, high-level raid on multiple properties owned by Combs, including his estates in Los Angeles and Miami. These weren't casual inspections. These were full-force federal operations carried out by agents in tactical gear, with sealed warrants and national attention. And what they reportedly uncovered has stunned even the most jaded industry insiders. This wasn't about tax evasion or simple fraud. According to insiders, the investigation exposed something far worse: an alleged network of abuse, coercion, and control that had been hiding in plain sight for years. Civil lawsuits already painted an ugly picture: allegations of sexual assault, trafficking, and intimidation dating back more than 2 decades. But what federal agents found during the raid added new weight to those claims: secure, windowless rooms allegedly used to detain individuals, missing surveillance footage, confidential documents detailing hush money arrangements, and employee accounts describing the homes as high-tech prisons. It didn't stop there. Forensic teams reportedly seized hard drives, encrypted phones, and financial records that hinted at off-the-books payments and complex shell companies. The working theory? That these homes weren't just the backdrop for parties and celebrity gatherings, but were also staging grounds for deeply disturbing activity shielded by power, money, and silence. Let that sink in. One of the most celebrated figures in black entertainment might now be facing not only public scrutiny, but the very real possibility of criminal prosecution. And this isn't hearsay. This is the result of a months-long investigation that's still unfolding in real time. Behind the headlines and Instagram stories is a federal probe that could reshape the way we view not just one man, but the culture of celebrity protection as a whole. And here's the part no one wants to say out loud. People knew. People in the industry. People in his circle. Maybe even people we admire. Over the years, there were whispers, rumors of parties that took a dark turn, of ex-employees forced to sign NDAs, of collaborators who distanced themselves for reasons they couldn't say on record. But when you're dealing with a man whose influence could make, or break, a career, speaking out became a risk few were willing to take. Until now. This video isn't about gossip. It's about pulling back the curtain on a story that's too big, too serious, and too far-reaching to ignore. You're going to hear direct testimony from those closest to the case. You're going to see the timeline of events, the evidence mounting behind closed doors, and the reason why the FBI isn't treating this like just another celebrity scandal. We'll break down the lawsuits. We'll explore the financial trails. We'll listen to former insiders who've risked everything to speak up. And by the time we're done, you'll understand why the entertainment world is holding its breath, and why some believe this could mark the fall of one of hip-hop's last untouchable giants. This is about more than one man. It's about power, silence, and the price people pay when both are abused. Strap in. It wasn't just a quiet knock on the door. It was a coordinated strike. Dozens of federal agents, some in tactical vests, some carrying sealed warrants, descending on Sean P. Diddy Combs' properties with a level of urgency typically reserved for organized crime and high-level corruption. On the morning of March 25, 2024, the FBI, along with agents from Homeland Security Investigations, HSI, raided 2 of Combs' estates simultaneously: his Los Angeles mansion in Holmby Hills and his waterfront compound in Miami. Helicopters circled overhead. Streets were blocked. Neighbors watched in stunned silence as armored vehicles and black SUVs rolled through their upscale neighborhoods. This wasn't routine. This was surgical. Federal authorities weren't there for a financial audit or a subpoena delivery. They were executing search warrants related to a widening investigation into alleged sex trafficking, coercion, and possible financial crimes. Multiple media outlets confirmed that these warrants were the result of months of sealed court filings, witness interviews, and evidence collection. And it wasn't just Diddy's name on the radar. Investigators were reportedly looking into an entire network: business associates, employees, former collaborators, people who might have facilitated, enabled, or helped cover up illicit activities. This was bigger than one man. Inside the mansions, agents moved methodically. Rooms were secured. Devices were seized. Forensic tech specialists combed through laptops, phones, USB drives, and paper documents. What they reportedly found has been described as both disturbing and damning. Sources close to the investigation revealed that in Combs' Los Angeles property, an estate that spans over 17,000 square feet, agents discovered multiple high-security rooms with surveillance capabilities. One of these rooms was allegedly windowless, soundproofed, and accessible only by biometric locks. Blueprints of the home showed modifications inconsistent with standard luxury renovations, designs more aligned with detainment than entertainment. In Miami, the focus shifted toward digital evidence. A server room tucked away beneath the house, rare for a private residence, was reportedly found with multiple wiped hard drives and active data scrambling software. According to one investigator who spoke anonymously to a major outlet, the team is attempting to recover the erased footage and files using deep forensic tools. More chilling were the documents found in Combs' private office and safe. Handwritten NDAs. Records of wire transfers to unnamed recipients. Legal memos suggesting a strategy of silence when it came to accusations. One folder, marked Confidential HR Matters, allegedly contained internal reports of employee complaints, most of them involving inappropriate conduct, threats, or sudden terminations following incidents that were never formally addressed. But it wasn't just what was found, it was how well hidden it was. Many of these documents were concealed in false bottom drawers, encrypted files, and off-site backups routed through foreign data storage services. To the FBI, this suggested premeditation, a calculated effort to cover tracks. What made this more than just a PR nightmare was the presence of eyewitnesses, former employees who had cooperated with investigators ahead of the raids. These individuals, some protected under whistleblower status, reportedly described patterns of manipulation, threats, and control inside the homes. One former assistant described the atmosphere as high luxury on the surface, high paranoia underneath. And while Combs wasn't arrested at the scene, the message was clear. The feds weren't testing the waters. They were ready to dismantle something, and someone they believed was far more dangerous than his public image would suggest. News of the raids exploded within hours. Social media lit up. Cable news cut into regular programming. TMZ broke the story first, followed by CNN, Rolling Stone, and even the New York Times, each confirming through law enforcement sources that this was not a one-off event. It was part of a federal investigation that could extend beyond state lines and beyond Diddy himself. The industry response was immediate. Collaborators began distancing themselves. Planned releases and brand campaigns were quietly paused. Even artists under Combs' current label imprint began scrubbing mentions of him from their social feeds. And still, the public asked, what exactly were the feds looking for? What would justify this kind of raid on one of the richest, most well-connected celebrities in America? The answer, authorities hinted, was simple and terrifying. They believed they were uncovering evidence of systemic abuse and exploitation, of real people harmed, silenced, and discarded under the shadow of extreme power. Whatever the agents found that day, it marked a turning point. The first real crack in the fortress Diddy had built around himself. And it was just the beginning. Luxury homes are expected to have high-end features, private theaters, gyms, spas, even panic rooms. But what investigators reportedly found inside Sean P. Diddy Combs' estates crossed a line between luxury and something far more disturbing. According to law enforcement sources familiar with the case, the mansions weren't just tricked out for comfort and security, they were allegedly modified for control. Inside Combs' Los Angeles mansion, a sprawling modern fortress in Holmby Hills, agents discovered at least 2 rooms that raised red flags immediately. One room was hidden behind a mirrored wall in what looked like an entertainment lounge. The door had no visible handle from the outside and could only be opened with a fingerprint scan or from an app connected to an encrypted internal system. Once opened, it led into a narrow, windowless hallway that turned into a padded room, lined with soundproofing materials and industrial-grade locks. These aren't the kind of renovations you find in a music mogul's media room. These are the kinds of design elements you find in interrogation facilities or illegal detainment setups. Investigators described the rooms as highly controlled environments, possibly used to isolate individuals or conduct activities away from surveillance. There were no windows, no cameras pointing inward. A security system was installed, but logs showed long stretches of erased footage or corrupted files, another red flag that pointed to intentional data destruction. One former house manager, who cooperated with federal investigators, referred to the space as the quiet room. According to her sworn affidavit, she had only seen it once, accidentally, when she was sent to deliver a change of clothes to a guest.
"He looked scared," she said.
"He didn't say a word, just took the clothes and closed the door. After that, I was told never to go near that part of the house again." In Combs' Miami estate, agents found a similar configuration, though this time, the focus was on surveillance and digital control. One floor of the home had a central control hub with monitors linked to cameras positioned throughout the property, except, curiously, none in certain areas like the guest wings and the lower-level private quarters. Why would someone spend tens of thousands on a state-of-the-art surveillance system only to intentionally exclude certain spaces? The working theory, according to an investigator quoted anonymously in legal filings, was simple. These weren't blind spots. They were blackout zones, purposefully unmonitored. That Miami compound also had what agents called a security annex, a small, fortified room next to the garage that housed servers, encrypted data backups, and a manual override switch for all internal systems, including doors, alarms, and camera feeds. It was essentially a digital kill switch, something usually reserved for elite military or intelligence setups. But this wasn't a government facility. This was the home of a music executive. What troubled investigators most wasn't just the presence of this infrastructure, but the context around it. Former employees gave consistent statements about areas of the home being off-limits, even to senior staff. Personal assistants weren't allowed in certain rooms. Security guards rotated frequently and were often hired from private firms with little traceable background. Some of them reportedly refused to speak with federal agents, even when subpoenaed. Then came the testimonies. A former bodyguard said under oath that Combs once referred to the Los Angeles property as his kingdom, where he controlled every inch. Another staffer, a live-in chef, claimed that guests would arrive for weekend parties and sometimes not leave for days, even when they seemed uncomfortable or disoriented. No one said anything. "You don't ask questions at that house," she added. The phrase gilded prison came up more than once in interviews. That's not poetic language. It's how insiders described the way people were allegedly manipulated or trapped inside a setting that looked glamorous on the surface, but was terrifying beneath it. There's another piece of the puzzle, a curious pattern of renovations. Investigators found permits and blueprints showing that multiple modifications had been made to the estates over the years, but none of those documents accounted for the hidden spaces. Contractors listed on those plans either denied involvement or refused comment when contacted by journalists. That raises an unsettling question. Were these rooms built under the table, by private, off-the-books labor, so there'd be no paper trail? As this story develops, these hidden rooms are becoming more than physical evidence. They're symbolic. They represent the hidden nature of the allegations themselves. The things nobody saw. The people who were told to stay silent. The moments of trauma tucked away in places the public was never meant to see. To the world, Combs' homes were palaces. To those on the inside, they may have been something else entirely. This wasn't just about protecting privacy. This was about shielding secrets, and those secrets are starting to unravel. Money talks. But silence? That costs even more. One of the most damning discoveries in the federal investigation into Sean P. Diddy Combs wasn't hidden in a basement or encrypted on a hard drive. It was spelled out clearly in a paper trail of non-disclosure agreements, wire transfers, legal letters, and internal communications that outlined a culture of intimidation and control. According to sources close to the case, federal agents seized dozens of documents during the raids, many of which detailed settlements between Combs and various individuals spanning nearly 2 decades. The common theme? Silence, in exchange for cash. A lot of it. Some NDAs were boilerplate, typical language about confidentiality and professional discretion, but others, reportedly, were far more specific. They included clauses about personal interactions, non-consensual incidents, and waivers of civil liability, all tied to payouts ranging from tens of thousands to, in a few cases, millions of dollars. One file, labeled Crisis Resolution 2017, outlined a payment of $875,000 to an unnamed woman who claimed she was assaulted at a private event at one of Combs' homes. The settlement included a strict gag order and a non-disparagement clause that prohibited her from speaking to any media outlet, legal entity, or social platform indefinitely. And she wasn't the only one. Another document referred to a series of wellness checks on former staff members, essentially legal euphemisms for making sure they didn't go public. These checks were allegedly carried out by intermediaries, private investigators, legal aides, or security consultants tasked with discouraging former employees from participating in lawsuits or media interviews. It wasn't always about money. Sometimes it was about pressure. In one affidavit, a former event coordinator claimed she was approached by a fixer just days after she began speaking with an attorney about a 2018 incident. The fixer reportedly warned her that going against Mr. Combs would ruin her life and reminded her that people in this industry don't protect traitors. The woman withdrew her legal inquiry shortly after and moved out of state within weeks. Another man, a former security guard, told federal agents that when he tried to quit, he was threatened with being blackballed from the industry and followed for the rest of his life. When asked if he believed the threats were serious, he answered plainly, "I didn't want to find out." Many of these testimonies paint the picture of a system designed not just to avoid consequences, but to erase them before they ever reach daylight. What's more alarming is how institutionalized these practices appeared to be. Legal analysts reviewing the leaked documents said they resembled corporate risk management playbooks, scripts, talking points, even damage control templates for how to respond to allegations. This wasn't panic. This was policy. In one leaked internal memo dated back to 2015, legal representatives advised on preemptive settlements for individuals who may pose future reputational risks, a strategy eerily similar to tactics used in the Weinstein scandal. The memo described these people not as victims, but as liabilities. That choice of language is telling. What makes these silencing tactics so dangerous isn't just the legal manipulation. It's the way they normalize misconduct. When someone with immense resources can pay for silence, there's no incentive to change behavior, only to bury it deeper. And when you have decades of practice doing that, it becomes second nature. One of the more disturbing stories came from a stylist who worked on set for a promotional shoot in 2019. She alleged that after witnessing a disturbing interaction between Combs and a young female guest, she brought it up discreetly to her manager. Within 48 hours, she was contacted by an HR consultant, made to sign an NDA, and paid a 5-figure sum as part of an exit agreement. Her contract ended the following week. She never filed a formal complaint. She said she didn't think it would matter. These stories aren't isolated. They form a pattern. And that pattern suggests that Combs and the legal infrastructure around him used his money not just as a tool for success, but as a weapon to suppress the truth. The federal investigation is now reportedly exploring whether any of these payments violate obstruction or witness tampering laws, particularly if individuals were paid during active investigations or civil proceedings. Prosecutors are also looking into whether shell companies were used to hide these payouts, a potential violation of financial disclosure and fraud statutes. This is about more than just covering up bad press. It's about a sustained effort to silence alleged victims and witnesses using fear, money, and power. And here's the question that hangs in the air. If this many people had to be paid off, what exactly were they being paid to forget? For years, the image of P. Diddy was that of a self-made mogul who beat the odds. But these documents tell a different story, a story of someone who may have built his empire not just on hustle and hits, but on coercion and cover-ups. The truth was never meant to come out. But now that it has, it's not going away. The raid may have captured the public's attention, but the storm had already been brewing in courtrooms. Long before federal agents showed up at P. Diddy's front gate, survivors had been telling their stories through civil lawsuits that quietly piled up over the years. At first, they were dismissed by some as opportunistic or exaggerated. But as the number of plaintiffs grew, as the patterns became harder to ignore, and as the details aligned disturbingly well, those once ignored filings began to look more like a blueprint for what the FBI would later find. The first high-profile civil case to break through came in November 2023, when a woman identified in court documents as Cassie Ventura, Diddy's longtime partner and former protege, filed a bombshell lawsuit accusing him of rape, repeated physical abuse, and years of psychological torment. Her complaint was not vague. It was painfully specific, outlining instances where she was allegedly drugged, assaulted, and surveilled. Within 24 hours of filing, that case was settled for an undisclosed sum. To the public, that might have looked like a quick resolution. But to attorneys and investigators watching closely, it was a flare. Because almost immediately after that settlement, more women came forward. A second lawsuit dropped within a week. Then a third. Then a fourth. By February 2024, at least 7 women and 2 men had filed civil suits against Combs, each detailing strikingly similar experiences: abuse of power, sexual misconduct, threats, coercion, and in several cases, allegations of sex trafficking. What unified these claims wasn't just the nature of the abuse. It was the environment in which it allegedly occurred. All of them described homes with restricted access, locked rooms, no external oversight. They described being isolated, monitored, and silenced. And in each case, the same supporting elements appeared: NDAs, payouts, or sudden professional blackouts that made careers disappear. One former backup dancer described an encounter during a promotional tour in 2016 where she was allegedly coerced into sexual acts under threat of being blacklisted from future performances. She said Combs told her, "You're either in or you're gone." She didn't perform again in the industry. Another woman, who worked as a digital content producer for one of Combs' ventures, claimed in her lawsuit that she was invited to a private dinner under the guise of discussing a promotion. What followed, she said, was a night of intimidation, sexual misconduct, and a forced signature on a confidentiality agreement presented at 3 a.m. What's crucial here is not just the number of lawsuits, it's how they corroborate one another. Plaintiffs described being offered alcohol laced with unknown substances. They described staff members trained to look away or divert attention when things escalated. They talked about rooms with no cameras, handlers who managed who could come and go, and psychological games designed to confuse and disorient. They also described retaliation. Nearly every lawsuit mentions some form of post-incident punishment: sudden firings, threats to family members, anonymous calls, lost opportunities. One plaintiff, who asked to remain anonymous even in court filings, claimed she was followed for weeks after quitting her position as a live-in assistant. She later received a threatening letter warning her not to invent false stories or share personal information with outsiders. In a moment of legal irony, Combs' own history of building tight contracts and legal walls may now be working against him. Several of the plaintiff's attorneys are using his past NDA strategies, employee handbooks, and HR procedures as evidence of systemic attempts to suppress complaints. They argue that the environment wasn't just abusive, it was engineered that way. And the lawsuits are beginning to hold weight. In early 2024, a New York judge denied Combs' motion to dismiss 3 of the most severe cases, stating there was sufficient credible evidence and a consistent pattern of behavior that warrants further examination. The ruling cited overlapping timelines, consistent details, and witness corroboration. The judge's language was clear. These weren't isolated incidents. They were part of a larger mechanism of control and exploitation. Legal experts believe the civil cases will act as the foundation for criminal charges. Civil court is often where the truth leaks first, said one former federal prosecutor. It's where people feel safer to speak before the government steps in. But when those lawsuits line up with physical evidence, then you've got a real storm coming. That storm is exactly what seems to be unfolding. Behind the headlines, federal investigators are quietly interviewing plaintiffs from these cases. Sources indicate that several civil complainants have also given sealed depositions to criminal investigators under oath. That means prosecutors aren't just building a PR case, they're building a federal one. The lawsuits, once brushed off as smear campaigns, have now become cornerstones of a larger narrative. One that challenges the legacy of one of music's biggest names and forces the industry to reckon with just how much was ignored, tolerated, or covered up in the name of fame. This wasn't a celebrity falling from grace. This was a calculated, years-long collapse, triggered not by gossip, but by brave people who refuse to stay silent any longer. And they may just be the ones who bring the empire down.